Good morning, Vivek sir.
Good morning.
You're welcome to this STC, sir.
You can hear me loud and clear, right?
Yes, sir. Definitely.
Thank you.
So we are very shortly. We are going to start. We are waiting for that.
Varun, am I audible?
Yes, sir. Good morning, sir. Good morning, Bharat,
Yeah,
sir.
good morning. Good morning. I
Yes,
just
sir. You're
wanted to
audible.
check if my voice is clear.
Yes, sir. It's very clear, sir.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Okay, sir. Again, welcome, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
Good morning, Dr. Vivek, and good morning, Dr. Gaurav. I'm
Yes,
Abu.
sir.
Hi, Abu sir. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you.
Good morning, sir.
All is well?
Yeah, everything is fine, sir. Vivek, how are you?
Good morning, AK Sir.
Yeah, good morning, Rakesh sir.
Good morning. Good morning, Gaurav. Good morning, Vivek.
Good morning.
So we are just waiting for our director, sir. ये मेरा मैं कर नहीं सकता ना हाँ
I guess like everyone, I'll keep my camera and video off and audio off till needed. So, but I'm here.
Good morning, sir.
Varun, start.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Shall we start, sir? Rakesh, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Very warm good morning to all. Myself, Dr. Varun Sharma, on behalf of Department of Industrial and Production Engineering, welcome you all to the inaugural ceremony of the online STC on contemporary material technologies. Begin with, I would request Dr. Rakesh Kumar, convener of the course, to welcome all who have joined here today and introduce them with the course. Rakesh, sir, please.
Okay, thank you, Varun. Hello, everyone. A very warm welcome. A very warm good morning to Honorable Director Professor Lalit Kumar Avasthi, the chief guest of the course, the guest of honor of the day, Professor A.K. Sharma from Department of Mechanical and Industrial Engineering, IIT Roorkee, Dr. Vivek Sharma from Chemical Engineering Department, University of Illinois at Chicago, USA, and Dr. Gaurav Verma, Department of Chemical Engineering, Punjab University, Chandigarh. Dr. Rajiv Trehan, Head of the Department, Industrial and Production Engineering, Deans, and all the present excellences. My organizing team comprising Dr. Varun Sharma, Dr. Rajiv Verma, and Dr. Shailendra Bedoria, all from the IPE department, my dear colleagues and dear participants. On the behalf of organizing team, I, Rakesh Kumar Sharma, from Department of Industrial and Production Engineering, welcome you all to the proceedings of inaugural ceremony of this online short-term course titled Contemporary Material Technologies. There is no doubt in the fact that the competitiveness of manufacturing sector depends upon the advancements in material technologies. The current trend of miniaturization, the emergence of advanced materials, and the growing demand of customized manufacturing is proving catalytic in bringing a major transformation in the area of manufacturing and material processing. In fact, it has acquired a center stage in the whole gamut of production engineering research. Various material processing technologies such as nanotechnology, biotechnology, surface engineering, modern machining, additive manufacturing, etc., are going through a phase of rapid changes to synchronize to the advent of newer materials. All over the globe are venturing on newer experimentations, leading to further push to this area. In this backdrop, the short-term course intends to enhance the awareness level of the young research community working in the area through a three-pronged strategy. In general, the course would facilitate scaling up of post-graduation education and demand-driven research and development. Specifically, the course would motivate participants toward pursuing the research in the cognitive areas of nanotechnology, biotechnology, surface engineering, modern machining, additive manufacturing, etc. Indirectly, the course also intends to reinforce the teaching in the areas focused in the short-term course among the participating faculty members. Addressing the importance and relevance of the research trends in the manufacturing sector, the proposed short-term course has been planned with the following objectives: to present a bird's eye view of latest trends in smart materials and advanced material technologies, to train the participants to carry out research in recent areas of considerable growth in new and emerging manufacturing techniques and materials and new devices and applications, and to familiarize the participants with the material characterization tools applicable to the short-term case focus areas. The importance of the topic of this online short-term course may be gauged from the overwhelming response we have received. We received more than 600 requests within 6 hours of floating of this course, but we finally confined the registration to only 300 candidates. As far as speakers of this course are concerned, we have all the shining stars of this field. We have speakers from world's best universities, IITs, and India's other premium institutions. The experts will cover the following research topics in coming days: advancements in function materials, macromolecular engineering of formulations, processing, and additive manufacturing, materials genomics, next generation high specific strength fiber reinforced polymer composite materials, coating technology and characterization techniques, nanotech machining, FRP composites, additive manufacturing, and carbides for energy applications. With this bird's eye view of the short-term course, I once again express my gratitude to our chief guest, Dr. Lalit Kumar Awasthi, our guests of honor, all the dignitaries present who spared their valuable time and made it to be with us at the inaugural session. Also, I once again welcome all the participants and wish them all the best for a fruitful experience from this course. Wish you happy learning and thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Proceeding forward, it is time for our guest of honor to address our audience. Firstly, I would like to request Dr. Gaurav Verma for a
Dr.
brief
Varun?
address. Yes, sir.
Yeah, please continue.
Dr. Verma is an associate professor and adjunct faculty, nanoscience and technology at Punjab University, Chandigarh. He is an M.Tech in polymer science and engineering from IIT Delhi and PhD in nanotechnology and polymers from Punjab University. He has also been C.V. Raman postdoctoral fellow at MIT, USA, under Professor Strano, who is a student of Richard Smalley, who is a Nobel laureate. Dr. Verma brought first USD earning to PU Chandigarh as a consultant to a US company. So I heartily welcome Dr. Verma to please address the audience. Please, sir.
Yeah, thank you for the introduction, Dr. Varun. Reverend Professor Awasthi, the Director of NIT Jalandhar, Dr. Rakesh Kumar Sharma, the organizers, my friends Apoorv and Dr. Vivek. It's indeed a great pleasure to be speaking on a platform where there's a large participation of researchers from all over India and also indeed from abroad. When you're talking on a topic like contemporary material technology, it's a huge challenge because the field is moving so fast and the dynamics are indeed so challenging that every day you'll find so many research publications and patents being filed that it becomes really a huge task to keep up with the pace. But what we need to do is, in our own small contribution to that area or this small niche in which we are working, We just need to keep constantly working in that area and keep updating ourselves, while also understanding what are the implications and applications in other areas. So what I would stress upon is, and I believe that there are participants from many different fields of science and engineering, we need to have a connectivity and a kind of a collaboration. A collaboration which is across the institutes and a collaboration which is across the fields. Now, this will augur well for upholding the status of material technologies in the world, and it will help an individual researcher to gain an insight into what other people are working into. When you read about research from other groups, you understand that the kind of technologies, the material technologies we are developing may have future applications or maybe short-term applications. But when we have our individual contribution, we got into this chain, we'll be enhancing not only our knowledge, but also we are looking at moving these contemporary material technologies to a next higher level. So I would request that apart from interacting amongst themselves and with the experts in these areas, we should come up with a team effort, or we come up with a group effort across institutions and across fields, so that we make material technologies more useful and more gainful. Thank you so much. And thank you for the opportunity to let me present my views in the session after this.
Thank you. Now I would like to invite our esteemed guest of honor, Dr. Vivek Sharma. Dr. Vivek Sharma is an associate professor of chemical engineering at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Dr. Sharma's soft matter ODS lab focuses on molecular science and engineering of formulations. His group develops distinctive experiments in theory for investigating interfacial flows and stabilities. Dr. Sharma received PhD in polymer and metal science engineering in 2008 and MS in chemical engineering in 2006 from Georgia Tech University, and pursued postdoctoral research in mechanical engineering at MIT. Dr. Sharma was selected as the Distinguished Young Rheologist by TA Instruments in 2015, won the 2017 College of Engineering Teaching Award at UIC, and was awarded the 3M Non-Tenured Faculty Award in 2019. So I heartily welcome Dr. Vivek Sharma to please address the audience.
Good morning, everyone. I'm calling you right now at 12:45 a.m. Chicago time. So I hope I still sound awake and as excited as I am to be part of this community. It's fairly important for us to recognize that the effort made by the organizing team to pull together such a diverse set of researchers, and I thank them for involving me in this. And I thank the director of NIT Jalandhar for his presence and inspiration for conducting such a workshop. Over the years, one of the main things that I've recognized at different conferences is the number of people who come to attend these conferences from India has increased considerably in last 5 or 6 years, but the overall participation still remains pretty limited. And I think outside the IITs and ISC, we don't see that many people participate at international conferences. So my whole hope is to at least inspire some of you to start thinking about not only conducting research at a level that will allow you to present everywhere, but also developing those kind of networks that will allow you to travel as visiting scientists, send your students as visiting scientists, sometimes summer interns, and that kind of interaction provides opportunities that are life-changing for most students. It turns out that there's far better integration of these kind of activities between US and Europe than is between US and India. And even from China or Japan, there's a fair number of people who come and attend conferences or come as interns. I'm going to reserve all my scientific comments to my presentation, primary presentation tomorrow. So I look forward to getting your questions, and if we are not able to interact today or tomorrow, you'll have access to my email and website, and I'll be very happy to receive correspondence from you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It is a pleasure to have with us Professor A.K. Sharma. He is a professor in Mechanical and Industrial Engineering Department and coordinator of Design Innovation Center at IIT Roorkee. He completed his MTech in Computer Integrated Manufacturing and PhD in Surface Engineering from IIT Madras. Dr. Sharma has completed 8 funded research projects, including Spark, DST, Indo-Ukraine, and Indo-US projects. He is fellow of Institute of Engineers, member of Hydraulics and Pneumatics Committee, Bureau of Indian Standards. He has been awarded DARD Fellowship to work in Germany. So I take immense pleasure in inviting our guest of honor, Professor A.K. Sharma, to share his views with our audience. Sharma, sir, please.
Thank you, Dr. Varun. Thank you. Good morning to you all. Director Professor Awasthi, my colleagues, Professor Gaurav, Professor Vivek, and other dignitaries like deans, various deans, and faculty colleagues from NIT Jalandhar, Professor Rakesh, Dr. Varun, Dr. Razi, and all other faculty members and all other participants. So indeed, a very good welcome and good morning to you all. So I'm indeed very happy to be here for the second time in NIT ZE platform. And in fact, I spent my first day of this year, 2020, in NIT Jalandhar. I came there physically on 1st of January this year, and today it is September 8. I am again on another platform of NIT Jalandhar. So I'm really very happy, and this shows how dynamic NIT Jalandhar fraternity is. I really congratulate Professor Awasthi and his young and dynamic team for keeping themselves very busy during these days and keeping others also busy. Although people say that this is a time, very tough time, a pandemic time, not much things are happening, and so on and so forth. But I believe this pandemic has given us another opportunity, or rather many other opportunities, to explore the things from different perspectives. What I can see today is I'm talking to, or I will be talking to, or all my friends will be talking to 300 different participants from different organizations in the coming 4 or 5 days during the course of this program, which really would not have happened had it been a physical course, which I have seen. Maybe only 100 participants I have seen during the course where I delivered my lecture in January. So how can we say that this is a very bad time? Rather, this is a good time in another sense. We are talking to reaching out to 300 people. We got 600 applications. I don't know. Today, Dr. Vivek is speaking from Illinois. So I don't know, how it would have been easier, like whether to come from Illinois to travel back to India to speak for 1 hour or so in this program. But today he is very happy, and he is speaking from his home or office. I don't know, but it is midnight, 12:30, and he is very happily speaking to us, to 300, 400 faculty members in India. So this way we can see that even these tough times are also, like, in a sense, very good times from different perspectives. And if we talk about materials, people are now running after developing the vaccine. What is a vaccine after all? It's again boils down to a material. And the challenge is to we people, like how we can develop a material, bring that material to the best possible use to counter this situation. Is it not an opportunity for us, for the material scientists, for the engineers, for the biotechnologists, to put our thoughts, to bring our thoughts into a different domain where we can do something very good for the human being or the mankind? And maybe many people have also like developed the material, but again, the fine tuning that material, how that material is going to work, how long it is going to work, how what will be the reactions of human body, what will be the reactions from like other animals. So these are like, it has given us tremendous opportunity to look across our boundaries. It is not limited to only that material, development of the material, but seeing across the boundaries. So this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us. And I'm very happy, and I really would like to congratulate Professor Awasthi for giving for giving this opportunity, or leading his young and dynamic team in such a way, and that they are organizing such type of programs during these days and bringing the people together. As Dr. Vivek said, this is opening up the opportunities for further collaborative work. I would also like to mention the efforts of Dr. Rajiv, Dr. Varun, and Dr. Rakesh. They have put a lot of efforts to bring and to collaborate to fine tune the things so that things move very smooth, even being at a distance of several thousand kilometers. I am probably at like 300, 400 kilometers away, but Dr. Vivek is at several thousand, 6,000 kilometers away. Okay, so that's fine. I hope all the participants will have a very nice time during the coming 4 or 5 days, and it will be a very fruitful program. And I'm personally happy to be associated with this program. All my maybe some technical talk or scientific talk, whatever is assigned to me, will be sharing in the allotted time. Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you. Over to you, Dr. Varun.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Now I would like to invite a worthy director to address the audience. Before that, I would like to introduce an amazing and inspiring personality, Professor L.K. Awasthi. Professor Awasthi took the charge of NIT Jalandhar in 2016. Under his leadership, the institute has taken a tremendous leap in terms of all qualitative as well as quantitative parameters. He has recruited 150 plus faculty members in last 3 years, promoted the research culture of the international level, and consequently succeeded in bringing the laurel of 52nd NRF rank from the previous 113th position. At present, he is also in charge director of NIT Hamirpur, and today he has connected to us from his office at NIT Hamirpur. Now I heartily welcome our director, sir, to address the audience.
Good morning. Greetings from NIT Jalandhar. Professor Apurva Kumar Sharma, Professor Vivek Sharma, then we have Professor Gaurav, and the coordinators. We have Dr. Rakesh Kumar, Dr. Rajiv Verma, Dr. Varun Sharma, Dr. S.S. Badoria, along with the head of department, Dr. Rajiv Trehan. I congratulate all of you for taking such a good topic for this short-term course. As has been said by Professor Apurva Kumar Sharma, NIT Jalandhar has actually transformed or translated this challenging time into an opportunity. We have been, our faculty members have been doing good. Recently, the innovation ranking, the ATL ranking, the institute is in A band, and a lot of innovations has taken place. This institute came in 1987 as Regional Engineering College Jalandhar with the humble intake of 100 students at UG level. Started its PG in 2006. It was rechristened as Institute of National Importance by Act of Parliament in 2007. And the institute has been progressing continuously. Now, the intake at undergraduate with 11 undergraduate UG programs is 1135, and in 16 MTech programs, the intake is roughly 550, and we take usually 125 PhD students per year. So that is how the institute has grown. As has been said, I have added more than 100 faculty members, and when I joined, we were 100. So roughly 200 faculty members, and there is a proper mix of old and new faculty members. The institute is progressing nicely, and the blend is coming forward with the innovative practices. This year we are celebrating the year of innovations and patenting. Along with that, maybe year of online courses, because the total number of courses, short-term courses which we have organized has exceeded roughly 30 such courses have been organized, and most of them during this pandemic time. So I congratulate faculty for taking all these initiatives. Again, another comment of Dr. A.K. Sharma was collaboration. Definitely, this is a big platform for collaboration, more than 300 people online, and I definitely would like my department to be part of maybe team at University of Illinois, or part with the Punjab University, or part with the IIT Roorkee, because in isolation we may be able to do certain things which are already done by somebody somewhere. So in collaborative thing, we can achieve more. No one of us is as intelligent as all of us together. So that's what I think that will be nice. Dr. Gaurav also have stressed for collaboration, and I definitely think that there is a lot of scope for collaboration at NIT Jalandhar. One more fact I would like to share with you is that since January this year, the institute has published more than 450 Scopus papers, which is a record in the history of NIT Jalandhar. My only issue is that even if 10% of these 475 odd publications, if we are able to transform them into products which are useful to common man, definitely we are going to achieve the target of Honorable Prime Minister Modi ji, that of Atmanirbhar Bharat. So the onus is on IITs, NITs to lead and to come forward with solutions to the common man. The material, as has been already explained, is everywhere. A medicine is a material, and similarly, anywhere the vehicles have a lot of material. Then we talk of smart materials. We can talk of self-healing materials. We can talk of many such things which can be then used for the for upliftment of the life of a common man. So there is a lot of scope in materials, in manufacturing, in we are talking of industry 4.0. Similarly, we can have manufacturing 4.0, where the sensors and computers and cameras, they can give you better efficiency and better output. So with these words, I congratulate the Department of Industrial Production, Dr. Train and his team, Dr. Rakesh, and I acknowledge greatly the availability of Dr. Vivek Sharma, because this is again maybe around 1 in the morning in Chicago. So thank you for joining us. I thank Professor A.K. Sharma. I thank Professor Gaurav Verma as well for joining us in this inaugural function. And I hope there will be a good learning for all the 300 participants, online participants during this short-term course. I hope that everyone connected and their near and dear ones, they should be in good health during this COVID-19 pandemic, and hope that humanity as a whole come out of this pandemic at an early time by devising a vaccine for this. Thank you. Jai Hind, Jai Bharat.
Thank you, Director Sir, for your enlightening talk. You have been a continuous source of inspiration to all of us. Now I would like to request our worthy head of department to present the vote of thanks.
Good morning, everybody. On behalf of Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, National Institute of Dharma, and Dr. Apurva Kumar Sharma, and our Honorable Director, Sir, Professor L.K. Avasthi, the pandemic of COVID has forced education institutions to think over the new methods of teaching, and as well as for students, the new methods of learning process. And we have also triggered the higher education institutions to develop strategies to grab opportunities and cope with the challenges. So we need to develop a balanced approach for offline as well as online education. The insightful suggestions which are being shared today, which have been shared today by the learned speakers in the education sector, and as well as from their experience with the industry, with the present young faculty of the institutes to prepare themselves for the future. So I thank all the learned speakers for sparing precious time out of their busy schedule and getting up at late night. Thank you, sir, for enlightening us on the topic. So I especially thank our worthy director, Professor L.K. Avasthi, for continuously inspiring and motivating us to remain active and organizing all such events, all such STCs. So he has given transformational leadership to the institute as earlier told by Dr. Varun Sharma also. So I would like to share with you that during the time of pandemic, Professor Avasthi has pursued the faculty to contribute not only at the institute level by holding online classes and online other processes, but also to share their knowledge and experience across the world, and connecting with the experts like yourselves. So I thank Dr. Rakesh Sharma, Dr. Rajiv Verma, Dr. Varun Sharma, and Dr. S.S. Badoria, who are the coordinators of the program, for making necessary arrangements to organize this webinar so meticulously. And I thank to all the participants for enthusiastically and overwhelmingly responding to our this meet and participating here. I hope in the next few days you will be able to interact with the learned faculty and you will be able to back up more knowledge, and you will be able to see how to handle the challenges and grab opportunities. So thank you so much, sir. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. With this, we conclude our inaugural session. So I request the participants to stay online for an introductory session by Dr. Vivek Sharma after 10 minutes, that is around 11:45. So stay tuned. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Vivek, sir?
Yes.
We shall be starting at 11:45. Is it okay, sir?
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
So whenever you're ready.
But just I'm giving the introduction. Then we'll start it. So I again welcome you all to this introductory session by Dr. Vivek Sharma. Dr. Vivek Sharma is an associate professor of chemical engineering at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Dr. Sharma pursued postdoctoral research in mechanical engineering at MIT, received PhD in polymer science and engineering with a minor in physics, material science and engineering in 2008, MS in chemical engineering with minor in nonlinear dynamics and chaos in 2006 from Georgia Institute of Technology, MS in polymer science from the University of Akron in 2003, and BTech in textile technology from IIT Delhi in 2001. His research interests include rheology and processability, DS rheometry, polymer physics, uh, then structural color, adhesion and wetting, food science and molecular engineering, biophysics and protein science. Dr. Sharma's soft matter ODS lab, which includes optics, dynamics, elasticity, and self-assembly laboratory, focuses on molecular science and engineering of formulations, which is a multi-component complex fluids. His group develops distinctive experiments and theory for investigating interfacial flows and instabilities, surface forces, optics, self-assembly, and nonlinear viscoelasticity of industrial and biological soft matter. Dr. Sharma was selected as the Distinguished Young Rheologist by TA Instruments in 2015, won the 2017 College of Engineering Teaching Award at UIC, and was awarded the 3M Non-Tenured Faculty Award in 2019. Dr. Sharma has published more than around 100 research articles in peer-reviewed journals and international conferences. He has 2,000 plus Google Scholar citations and H-index of 20 plus till date. Apart from his academic contributions, he has deep interest in poetry and writing. Dr. Sharma's first book of verse, The Saga of a Crumpled Piece of Paper, was shortlisted for Muse India Young Writer Award in 2011. His work in English appears in Atlanta Review, Batue, Lithium, the Cartel Review, Muse India, Reading Hour, among others, while his Hindi articles and verses appear in Divya Himachal, Himachal Mitra, and Argala. So let us welcome our guest of honor, Dr. Vivek Sharma. Now I hand over the session to Dr. Sharma to start with the introductory talk of this STC.
Thank you for that detailed introduction. I've hardly ever seen an introduction that included all the poetry list as well. So the ambition today is to give you a very brief summary of some of the ideas that motivate me and motivate some of my colleagues at UIC and elsewhere. This is not an exhaustive survey of contemporary material technologies by any means, but it's rather sort of a quick overview of what kind of things and opportunities people in material science at Georgia Tech, MIT, and elsewhere think about, and the kind of materials that we at chemical engineering at UIC and in other universities where my colleagues, collaborators, and friends are located are looking at. So conventionally, when we think about materials, the focus always has been on understanding properties of metals and alloys, as well as ceramics, which we can classify as hard materials, because these have mechanical properties that are that would classify them with relatively high modulus. And most often these not only have high modulus, but they have very small elongation to break. In contrast to metals and alloys and ceramics, which are often classified as hard materials, polymers, biomolecules, liquid crystals, and a lot of personal care products that we would use as foods, cosmetics, coatings, they tend to have much lower moduli. Moduli can be less than a millipascal for many of these products. And so they are often classified together as soft matter. My personal interests or research interests have more or less focused on soft matter, and most of the soft materials, including polymers, biological materials, have both viscous behavior and elastic properties. So they are viscoelastic materials. And that distinguishes them again in terms of their mechanical response in comparison to metals and alloys and ceramics. With the current advances in terms of design of new materials, of course, with metals and alloys, a lot of things have been studied to death. In ceramics, there's a lot of new regenerated interest in trying to figure out alternatives to cement that involve less carbon dioxide production and involve use of more biodegradable materials or reuse of polymers, for example. Textiles and fibers is another conventional field where I received my undergraduate education as well. But off late, there's a lot of effort, especially in the last 6 months, to understand how to create, say, non-woven materials that can be used for making PPEs and how to embed all sorts of antibiotic materials into those. Combining either metals and polymers or ceramics and polymers has been long-standing tradition in many of the materials, mechanical engineering departments in IITs as well as in NITs in India, and composites research has a fairly long tradition in India. What has also started to emerge as a pretty strong presence in India is research on soft matter, and that's an area where I see there's going to be a lot of growth and opportunities in years to come, partially because we are going to rely on soft matter technologies to come up with food alternatives, and I'll mention those briefly. Rely on soft matter ideas to come up with new, whether it's vaccines or antibodies or monoclonal antibodies that are used as drugs. So these are protein-based drugs, and hopefully these will also allow us to create the PPEs and other medically relevant devices and objects. So if we take a survey of different material science departments, they either organize themselves in terms of what materials people are studying. And the latest trend is to also look at nanostructured materials like graphene, fullerene, thin films, and these find applications mostly in terms of sensing or devising new photovoltaic or electronic devices. Or most material technologies are organized around topics like health and medicine. So I already mentioned PPEs, but there's a fair amount of effort in developing new drugs, drug delivery, as well as in tissue engineering, and latest efforts are also in terms of organ printing that hopefully will grow in future. Energy has become a large emphasis for all of us, especially as we try to move away from oil-based technologies. Environment is becoming an inspiration for designing everything from new cosmetics and coating materials, which are based on materials that are sourced from plants and surfactants and polymers that are sourced from plants. And that has driven a lot of new research, both in my group and in many groups around the world. Even in personal care, that means we'll be moving away from some of the traditional shampoos or traditional surfactants used in shampoos and body washes and even hand soaps. So as we think about infrastructure of future, there's again an increasing emphasis on designing composites that are made with materials that can be recycled. And this combination of environmental sustainability as well as the ever-ending ambition to prolong life and have an easier and better life means there's a strong motivation to understand structure, property, and processing relationships for all these different materials. In the particular department that I'm located at in Chicago, which is the biggest city in the state of Illinois, our materials research has my colleagues look at everything from biosensing and diagnostics that involves use of, among other things, graphene-based devices, try to create polymer-based vehicles for drug delivery, and here it's shown formation of toroidal particles that can have organic molecules embedded into polymeric porous materials. Then there's a large effort on designing membranes, whether it's for water purification or for fuel cell, and the membranes range from inorganic to organic membranes, and there's a spectrum of technologies used there, from things based on TiO2 to, in case of polymers, based on zwitterionic and charged polymers. Microelectronic processing continues to be a driver for industrial growth, and my own research interest lies in macromolecular engineering formulations, about which I'll give a very detailed presentation tomorrow. So if I think about my own research interests and fascinations, and if I think about the current pandemic, then one of the key things that was going to be helpful in even coming up with a solution to the virus and how to get rid of virus is understanding of how soap molecules behave, how lipids behave, and how they interact with each other. So from our daily experience, we know that washing hands has turned out to be one of the most effective ways of preventing transmission of this virus. And when we go back and think about how a soap functions or how a lipid functions, the essential idea is that both soap and lipids, phospholipids that are constituents of cell membranes, tend to have a hydrophilic head group. In soaps, there is one tail, which is a alkane of 12 to 18 carbons long. In phospholipids, there are two tails. And when you put both soaps and lipids in an aqueous solution, the hydrophobic part tries to get away from liquid water, and the only way it can do so is by organizing or self-organizing into these structures. So soap molecule is able to organize into so-called micelles, and if you increase the concentration of soap, then the shape can change from spherical to cylindrical, and that is an important part of understanding for designing things like shampoos. In the case of phospholipids, the packing problem turns out to be such that these look more or less like, say, plastic coffee mugs or coffee cups. So you can't really pack them tightly into a spherical structure. On the other hand, you can pack them into a bilayer, but because of their shape, they tend to form this nice liposome, as it's called, in absence of any intercellular material. Otherwise, this is how a cell membrane looks like. So in this case, hydrophobic interactions are playing a dominant role in driving molecular self-assembly. And understanding this, as I said, is also important for surfactant micelles, which play an important role in all our cleaning and detergent applications. If you start to look at these micelle formation at some detail, then there are block copolymer assemblies that allow us to make slightly larger particles, and then you can polymerize them or cross-link them sometimes to hide organic molecules in them and have an outer block that is hydrophilic, allowing it to survive in water. If we think about digestion, then bile salts tend to make a similar micelle and are able to hide away fat molecules and thus help in digestion, whereas in case of cleaning operations, the oil-based dirt molecules can hide away in this hydrophobic interior. Likewise, when you come in contact with a virus molecule, it is this interaction between the soap molecules and these lipid molecules that disrupts the self-assembled layer, and that takes care of coronavirus in our day and age. Then there are hydrogen bonding interactions that play a pretty important role in biological systems, especially in DNA double helix. And you can start to look at these interactions at the molecular perspective to understand biological structure and function of lipids or DNA. or we can try to use these principles in a more macroscopic sense, and it's done quite a bit in industry. A lot of my own research effort relies on understanding charge-driven self-assembly and charge-driven interactions, and those interactions could involve nanoparticles, which could in some cases be just these pigment particles or diaparticles present in ink, polyelectrolytes, that just refers to charged polymers, and charged polymers can have more or less these charge-bearing functional groups along the chain that when you add these polymers into a solution, into an aqueous solution, they spontaneously, just like regular salt, they dissociate into a charge-bearing chain and counter-ions or cloud of counter-ions around them. There's a possibility of designing polyelectrolytes with only part of the chain consisting of these charge-bearing groups, and that allows a fair amount of tunability in terms of designing what are known as particle polymer complexes or self-assembled structures like the ones I mentioned in the previous slide. And then if you have cross-linkable groups on them, then you can further organize them into cross-linked gels, and these would resemble things like Jello. So altogether, putting varying particle size, charge amount, polymer size, number of monomers on the polymer, and so on, together allows design of materials that can be used for particular applications. And applications for, say, charge-bearing polymers and their mixtures with micro and nanoparticles, as well as their mixtures with surfactants, tend to range from everything from drug delivery, tissue engineering, bioadhesives. Also can be used in new building materials because some polyelectrolytes are additives to cements, and in water purification. They can function in the same way as alum functions when we add that to dirty rainwater to purify it. All right, so these are some of the examples that based on charge-based assemblies. And if we look at the systems formed by polyelectrolytes with cross-linked hydrogels, those can be physically or chemically cross-linked, then these hydrogels turn out to be versatile biomaterials that again have a water, they carry a lot of water in them, and so become materials of choice for drug delivery and designing scaffolds, and also for making adhesives. So adhesives is something that remains a pretty well-developed field in some contexts, like the use of Scotch tape or masking tapes is very familiar to us. But what is fascinating there is that those masking tapes or Scotch tapes can stick to surfaces of such different roughness and wettability. The new research has focused more on trying to figure out how to create a similar kind of adhesive for underwater applications or for sealing wounds. And when we actually go and look at the detailed survey of where these kind of polymers that involve water-soluble chains that are finely cross-linked and form hydrogels are involved, you'll find them in applications ranging from energy storage to the biomedical adhesives that I just mentioned, drug delivery. Some of these polymers then are used in flexible electronics that involves a fair bit of solution-based processing, things that I will address tomorrow. And there are efforts to utilize this to create artificial skin or skin mimics and so on and so forth. And so again, if you just thought about adhesive hydrogels, then there's a whole spectrum of problems, and these are problems where we still need solutions, especially for sealants for bleeding or surgical sealants and for all these biological applications. So this is just one spectrum of material properties that become important when we are thinking of biomedical applications and polymers or lipids in that context. I'm just going to give another quick snapshot into another major problem that, so if we think about photovoltaics and photovoltaics as one avenue for solving energy problem, then the key question turns out to be, how do you end up finding the right material for making solar cells? And once you might find the right material, we need to have as high efficiency as possible. And here is a map of how these efficiencies have improved in last decade or so. This data is a little bit dated, so this is up to 2016, and of course these numbers keep improving over time. But irrespective of which material you pick, when we think about the problem of creating solar cells for worldwide consumption, then it will become a problem of scale up. And this problem of scale up is something, at least in current day, we are hearing a lot about it in context of even vaccines. How do you first find the right solution, then ensure that it works, and it really works under diverse range of scenarios, and then how do you scale it up? So if we start to think about something like a photovoltaic cell, then it turns out it in a typical processing operation that involves creating multiple layers that are involved in making a photovoltaic device. There's a range of length scales that one has to deal with, from nanoscopic to sort of the macroscopic, where you have the final cell. There are flows that are involved at all these different length scales, and there are temperature changes. And all of these are problems that not only material scientists and mechanical engineers and chemical engineers, but physicists and chemists can contribute quite a bit to as well. So again, I'm not going to dig deeper into any of these problems and challenges right away. What I'm going to give you a snapshot of is what I'll be talking about at length tomorrow. So in many of these applications, especially applications involving trying to create photovoltaic devices at a very rapid rate, or doing a diagnostic test at fairly high rate, which would involve depositing drops of, say, blood or saliva into multiple cells at a fast enough rate, and running the protocols rather quickly. These involve deposition of droplets or deposition of fluid at precise locations in a very controlled fashion. And understanding how we can move small amounts of fluid and control their positioning precisely, their spreading precisely, is important for photovoltaics, emerging electronics, as well as for many biomedical applications. And that is going to be one of the emphasis of my talk tomorrow, because a lot of my talk has focused in the past and continues to focus on understanding how addition of small amount of polymers, or how choice of polymers, their molecular weight, their concentration, and so on, influences drop formation physics, jetability, spinability, whether you can make fibers or not, sprayability, printing, stickiness of different fluids. And what I'll show you tomorrow is essentially, if we do an experiment that's similar to stretching a liquid bridge between finger and thumb, that allows us to get some sense of stickiness. And as it turns out, everyone who makes chashni in India, all the halwais actually know this test, and that's how they sometimes determine what chashni they need to make, or what consistency or viscosity they need for their chashni. But this is also a method that can be used for then trying to get a better understanding of how to design these advanced materials for applications ranging from new photovoltaic or organic photovoltaic devices, to designing artificial saliva, and even using this as a diagnostic test for figuring out if your biological fluid is infected. I'm going to sort of start to close with something which is a new area for me, but it's turning out to be an area that a lot of material science, chemical engineering, and mechanical engineering departments have started to think about quite a bit. And that is, if we think about the current food consumption, production, processing methods, it it turns out that we are going to run out of land. We are going to have a lot of environmental problems in terms of how much carbon dioxide is produced in meat production, especially in the West. And the only alternative we'll have in future is to think of plant-based meat and dairy alternatives, among other things. And just creating this plant-based meat and dairy alternatives means that you need to start with something like proteins derived from peas or from chana dal or from lots of lentils, and then undergo a wide range of processing methods to create the texture, the taste, the mouthfeel that you get from meat products. Likewise, thinking about how to get milk and milk-based products made from plant-based proteins. And these plant-based proteins won't be necessarily produced in the fields, but they would be produced in large reactors that rely on yeast and algae to produce things. So we've now started working with a company where they are trying to make these kind of proteins. And when you think about the material challenges there, all the conventional challenges that we are aware of, the structure property challenges come into play, all the processing challenges come into play. Proteins are quite distinct from polymers. They are quite distinct from all the conventional materials that we are used to processing at that length scale and at scale. And I hope, especially with tomorrow's talk, I'll inspire some of you to start to worry about how to invest some of your research effort into the future of foods as well. So I'm going to end here. I think in the beginning it was mentioned that my group is called Optics, Dynamics, Elasticity, and Self-Assembly. And I think in these snapshots of the ideas that I presented for either charge-driven self-assembly or for processability towards the end, you saw some element of how polymer physics and surfactant science or lipid science is at the heart of a number of things we do. Going forward, the quests that I'm fascinated by, I also mentioned a little bit today, and tomorrow I'll get to give you examples of what kind of questions arise as we think about processing and additive manufacturing that involves use of polymers, that involves use of complex fluids that could include colloidal dispersions containing particles, bubbles, droplets. So it could be emulsions or foams or particle polymer mixtures like you have in inks and paints, or it could be the surfactant polymer mixtures like you have in your conditioners and shampoos and a lot of food products. With that, I'll be very happy to take any questions, and I'll be happy to get emails and address those questions later if you come up with questions later. I hope I kept everyone on time too. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for this very enlightening introductory talk related to development of the new materials and giving insight to the research opportunities, particularly in designing of the new materials, which I think I haven't even thought of to this time. So thanks a lot, sir, for giving this very informative talk. Thank you, sir.
Welcome. Pleasure.
So now, dear participants, tomorrow we will be having a very elaborative talk by Dr. Vivek Sharma that will be organized at 11 a.m. So, moreover, you are requested to join the meet 10 minutes before the start of the session. Right? And in the afternoon, we shall be having a talk by Dr. Gaurav Verma. He'll be delivering his talk on advancements in functional materials. So let's meet at 2:30 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Enjoy your day.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Rakesh sir? Hello, Rakesh sir?
Yeah, so is the presentation visible to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, your presentation is visible.
Okay, so I hope it'll be okay. At any point of time, if you think that the presentation or my voice or any of the content is not visible or audible, so please do stop me in between because sometimes the speaker might not know.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Pardon?
Sir, good afternoon, Varun.
Yeah, good
Dr.
afternoon. Good afternoon.
So, shall we start?
Yeah, definitely. I'm ready. I'm ready.
Okay. Hello, everyone. This is Dr. Varun Sharma, Assistant Professor, Department of IP. As a course coordinator, I take great pride in welcoming you all once again to the second session of the first day of 5 days online STC on contemporary material technologies. I truly express my gratitude to today's expert and guest of honor, Dr. Gaurav Verma, for accepting our invitation and taking out his precious time for this online STC. Your presence will definitely make the event more informative, joyful, and memorable. We all, on behalf of NIT Jalandhar, heartily thank you for the same. Now it's my privilege to introduce a very dynamic and renowned personality, Dr. Gaurav Verma. Dr. Verma is an associate professor in polymer technology and adjunct faculty in nanoscience and nanotechnology at Punjab University, Chandigarh. He completed his MTech in polymer science and engineering from IIT Delhi and PhD in nanotechnology and polymers from Punjab University. He has been C.V. Raman postdoctoral fellow at MIT, USA, under Professor Strano, who was a student of Richard Smallesty earning to PU Chandigarh as consultant plant nanobionics, nanocomposite coatings, nature nanotech interface. He has been awarded the Indian Chemical Council significant contribution to agrochemicals in 2019. He was awarded JASCO Vention 2012. He has 5 Best Paper Awards. So now I invite Dr. Gaurav Verma to start the session with the talk titled Advancements in Functional Materials. Session over to you, sir. Hello, Gaurav, sir. Give it a time.
Gaurav sir, am I audible? Hello.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Now you are audible.
Okay, okay.
I think we have the disconnection between.
Right. So, can I start now? Right.
Yes, sir, definitely you can start the presentation. So please bring in the presentation mode. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity, Dr. Rajiv, and the organizers of this short-term course on contemporary material technologies. I'm thankful to Professor Rakesh Sharma and his entire team, including Dr. Varun. It was, in fact, a great opportunity when I visited NIT Jalandhar in January this year. Rajiv, it was in January, right? January 2020. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Hello.
Yeah, am I audible? So just let
Yes,
me
sir,
know whether.
definitely. Yes, sir, definitely, sir. You are audible. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You can continue with it. Yes.
Yeah, so I was just mentioning I was at NIT Jalandhar campus in 2020, January this year. And as the organizers also know it, and maybe some of the participants might also have been part of that course, right from the go, I have a habit of interacting and talking to my colleagues in the audience and eliciting their opinion on a subject which we discuss. But this is a unique platform, and this is a very different kind of a situation, wherein probably our hands are also tied in the sense that you can only present, but maybe not interact freely with the audience. But whatever is the situation, we have to undertake our tasks. And my task is to talk on contemporary material technologies. And as Dr. Rajiv said, I'll be talking on advancements in functional materials. I happen to be part of the introductory talk, and I happen to overhear Dr. Vikas Sharma from University of Illinois. And he was talking something about agriculture. Incidentally, a part of my talk is focused on this topic, wherein I talk about an organic-inorganic interface, which is actually a futuristic technology. And we are looking into sustainable agriculture, wherein functional materials can make a change to nature. Now, this is something very interesting because what we see now is a stark change in our eating habits, in the sustainability, in the environment, and what we are doing to nature, especially when you talk about COVID-19. It is very difficult to understand that how such a pandemic entered into our ecosystem. When we are so highly trained in science and technology, we are trying to reach Mars. But it's very difficult when you come down to a situation where a small virus like this has actually made the whole humanity kneel down, and maybe just lock itself down inside homes and offices or wherever you are and stop interacting. So what we understand from it, whether this virus is natural or it has some participations of human or lab, I don't know we'll be ever able to say that, but this will be really controversial. So are we doing something so much against nature that when nature comes back to us, humanity has absolutely no clue how to handle these situations? And probably COVID-19 and the year 2020 has taught us this. that whatever scientific discoveries we might be making and we are reaching out to other planets, but we still, when it comes to handling smaller situations on Earth, we are sometimes a kind of a failure. Now, I'm not saying that failures are negative, but the point I want to raise here is that failures will always teach you something positive. And that is the reason why I selected talking about nature and nanomaterials interface. But it will be focused more on sustainable agriculture, and I'll be talking about how we use something as common as carbon nanotubes to bring about significant changes in common crops like wheat, oats, and rice. So herein is the theme of the talk is the effect of on yield, anatomy, and toxicity, something which is very different from what as engineers or scientists you might believe that uh, a faculty from chemical engineering and nanotechnology would speak upon. But the real motivation on why I'm talking about this, apart from the situation of COVID-19 and what humanity has done to nature and how nature has come back to us, um, the real motivation for this work was we all understand that environment has become really unpredictable. When we talk about seasonal changes or changes in weather, sometimes it is difficult to say what will happen in a particular month or in a particular day. Now these are called vagaries of weather, and although we have satellite imaging and really other technologies to map the weather on Earth, seeing from space, but it still gets difficult to help farmers with the ground situation. In a similar vein, the water table and the environment, uh, which deals with the growth of crops, has become very detrimental. It has become very difficult to carry out agriculture activities in a particular area. And we might not be realizing because we still understand that the food crops, as well as the production of crops is still up to the mark. But if you hear news, you would know that for a farmer, it is really difficult to tackle these situations, and that is why there are so many suicides in states like Punjab, Maharashtra, central India, and maybe parts of Orissa and other places. They become a part of the news. We hear it, but what is the onus as scientists or engineers that we should also be working towards correcting this situation? Now, we might be saying that there is Jai Jawan, Jai Kisan, Jai Vigyan, and Jai Anusandhan. That is the watchword and given by our Prime Minister maybe 2 years back. But there is hardly any integration between Vigyan, Anusandhan, and Kisan. So this is one effort where we might be able to look into that situation of sustainability in agriculture and how to deal with the environment so that things like shrinking land resources wherein the agriculture land is converted into a habitat, and when we convert that into a concrete jungle, we don't think how much land of agriculture we have eaten into. And this makes agriculture a very difficult profession. And we might not realize the gravity of the situation, but very soon food sustainability will be a major issue world over. already quality food is an issue, but even routine crop production would become very difficult the way we are moving with the environment. So these are the prominent motivations for this work which we carried out and started about 6 years back. Now, the actual science behind using carbon nanotubes lies in the activity of carbon nanotubes, or the structure of carbon nanotubes, or the morphology of carbon nanotubes. And why this idea came to us was we were discussing the structure of carbon nanotubes, and we happened to relate it to the structure at nanoscale. And what I realized, as you see on your screen also, and if I can move my cursor, is the cursor visible to the audience?
Yes, visible, sir.
Yeah. So if you see this picture where I'm putting my cursor, all these three images are at nanoscale, and here the scale is around 20 nanometers. The middle picture is 100 nanometers, and the leftmost picture is again 100 nanometers. What we realized was that carbon nanotubes, if you play around with their chemistry and physics, they almost look like double-headed snakes at nanoscale, and they have probably a capacity to enter into some kind of a organic system. And this idea was again inspired by also the activity we saw in 2014, wherein there was mission sent to Mars, and we thought, can carbon nanotubes act as a satellite or a payload, which can be piggybacked with certain nutrients, and we can bring about changes in the any organic body where we want to interface this inorganic nanoparticle. So the simplest thing, although it sounds simple, but I thought let's put it into the organic system which is most favorite and most close to us, and that system is the crops or the plants. And you realize that the visual you see on the screen on your left is the seed, and this has a double coating. Now, as scientists and engineers, we might think that this seed system is pretty simple, but when it comes to inviting an external body into it, it is really protective. It does not allow any external thing to enter into it unless it likes it, and which we, in simple words, call it biocompatibility. So what we had to do is we had to play around with carbon nanotubes to make it really water compatible. And for that, we had to attach some functional groups on the surface of the carbon nanotube. And also to ensure that these carbon nanotubes are actually snake-like features, we had to disentangle them. Because the pristine form in which they exist is like an agglomerate. In simple words, if I say, it's like a gucha. So in order to make them have a snake-like feature, it was important to functionalize them and separate them into single strands of fiber. So just by seeing these images, you will be able to understand that we undertook a scientific step called seed priming. And priming a seed is very fashionable in the agriculture industry, especially in cotton, not in wheat. But we got this idea, we thought that we have to give time to seeds and carbon nanotubes to befriend each other, which we call biocompatibility. We have to allow the organic and the inorganic interface to develop, and once it is developed, then only there's a possibility of achieving results as we did, which you see on your screen when I'm moving my cursor. There's a faster germination and higher number of seeds which were primed by carbon nanotubes were able to germinate as compared to just pristine seeds where no treatment or no priming was given. Now, there are multiple issues involved here. The reason being, when you're using a nanomaterial to interface with something which is edible, because here you're talking about wheat, rice, and oats, which is a part of your daily breakfast. It becomes really a very tricky situation when you talk about this on any scientific forum, because it becomes really questionable why you're doing it and what will happen if these carbon nanotubes enter into the food chain. They become toxic, or they might be able to cause cancer, as there are many reports about carbon nanotube ending up with such a situation for humanity. So the precautions we had to undertake, and I've listed them down on the left. We had to wash off the seeds with any extra carbon nanotube which was seen lurking around on the surface of the seeds. You had to ensure that every single strand of carbon nanotube enters the seed coat and has to be acceptable to the seed. Because if by any chance the carbon nanotube is left on the surface of the seed coat and you plant this in soil, there's a possibility of carbon nanotubes entering the whole natural system, which you don't want. And that contamination is really questionable, because when you take up this research for publication, or when you put it forth in front of the scientific community, the first question which comes from the reviewers is, what happened to the carbon nanotubes once it was not allowed to enter by the seed? And therein the question of what is the optimum dosage which can be retained by the seed, which is acceptable by the seed, has to be decided by vigorous experimentation in the lab. Now, this situation is not one size fits all, because every seed is unique. Wheat is different from rice, rice is different from oats. And if I come to lentils, then you understand that the number of seed coats, and if you remember from your biological experiences or botanical experiences in lower classes or maybe middle school, we used to talk about cotyledons. So any seed would not let the carbon nanotubes enter it, even if it has a snake-like structure. So all the hypothesis goes for a toss if you take it just as a face value and you don't look into the mechanisms of carbon nanotubes entering the seed. And we had to do that before we got into the development of a product. So after a number of experiments were conducted, we came down to this number which you see on your slide right now, which is 70 to 90 microgram per milliliter. This is the amount which was perfect for wheat and maybe for a few other crops, which allowed us to ensure that you get the maximum germination of the prime plants. And the germination is much faster and there's no overdosage and there's no leaching out of carbon nanotubes to the soil as may be apprehended by in the scientific community. Also, the ideal diameter, which would ensure that the carbon nanotubes do enter the seed, is something between 13 to 18 nanometers. And we understand that carbon nanotubes do not come alone. They have a lot of artifacts with them, even if it is in the purest form. So those things you have to take care of. So the immediate procedure you had to conduct was slicing the seed into different cross sections to ensure whether or not the carbon nanotube really entered. And this we were able to conduct from our material science background and ensure that yes, the carbon nanotubes do enter the seed coat, and we saw one of the carbon nanotubes jutting out when we undertook a scanning electron microscopy of these samples. And when we looked into control, because when you're dealing with biological samples, you can always be sure that these fiber-like features are very common. So it's very difficult to distinguish between a carbon nanotube and any normal natural feature you would see in a seed coat. And we also understand that even if you're doing a field emission scanning electron microscopy and your organism is all carbon, even if you do a electron dispersion or energy dispersion X-ray, you might not be able to distinguish whether this is a carbon nanotube fiber or it is integral part of the plant already. But thankfully, the sectioning which we did see a penetration of carbon nanotube into the seed, and we also saw its after effect, which were encouraging. Now, if you look at the control of these seedlings, all these are actually lab experiments, and they have been undertaken in a petri dish. You will understand that the control behaved in a very inhibited manner as compared to the primed seedlings, which started to grow really fast in both directions. What you see on above the seedling is the shoot, while the root is below it, and this was much faster if you keep just a scale around to compare. The amount of growth was really phenomenal, and we needed to understand why would this happen when you're allowing a foreign material to enter a bioorganism or a plant. Because we know that the plants are empowered to make their own food, unlike human beings, because we rely on external sources. But plants have chlorophyll, and they have the capacity of converting sunlight into useful energy and into sugar like glucose, which is transmitted throughout the plant to let it grow and have a fruit of its own. So why would it allow something like as peculiar as the carbon nanotube, which otherwise would have been totally not useful and unproductive to the plant in carrying out any function? But this hypothesis is not understood unless we know that what immediately happens to the anatomy of the plant, specifically the roots. So as material scientists or engineers, the first thing which came to our mind as a group was to look into the microscopic root hair which is developing for these primed seedlings. And very interestingly, when you see these images, this dense hair network for an unprimed or a control, you would be surprised the small micro-sized hair which grew on the prime seedlings, which actually tells you that the, the plant has accepted, not only accepted the carbon nanotube, but positively accepted. Because these anatomical changes in the plants and these physiological changes, wherein one single main root and these side roots and the dense root hair which develops on the surface allows it to get into the soil and capture whatever nutrients or water vapor is available in the on the surface of soil, and the growth becomes phenomenal, as we saw it in terms of the small plant saplings which are visible on the screen. We have put a pink background to highlight this feature. So simply putting it, if I want to use an analogy and say that if I give you more hands to work, you would be able to do a lot of multitasking. But at the same time, you have to have a synchronization with the brain, because our brain is tuned to work with 2 hands and 10 fingers. But if I give you 10 hands and 100 fingers, what is going to happen? So playing with nature, but at the same time ensuring that there are positive results, we have to see the long-term impacts. And that brings me into the proposition of looking into the later or the after effects of the serial growth, which have to be seen from time to time. And not only that, growth has to be ensured just on a petri dish inside the lab. It has to be replicated in actual soil conditions, because I cannot grow wheat and extract grains from a lab or a laboratory effort. What I need is, I have to put them into field conditions, I have to put them into soil, I have to go by the protocols which nature follows, and maybe monitor their growth periodically. For example, after 30 days, that is one significant milestone which the agriculturists look into before deciding whether they're going to have a bumper crop or not. So we undertook the same protocols, and for this work we had to collaborate with people from botanical and agriculture science, and we had to look from this perspective to understand how this growth varies with the concentration of the multi-walled carbon nanotubes which we feed. I'm using the word feed instead of priming, just to make you understand how much carbon nanotubes were put into the seeds in the beginning, or the start of the experiment. So as I said, we came down to a number of 70 to 90 microgram per milliliter. That is the amount you put into water, and that water acts like the bridge between the seedlings as well as the carbon nanotubes which I am trying to enter into the plant system. Now, once you enter into field conditions, it becomes really difficult to analyze where your carbon nanotube went, because you are talking about a nanoscale feature, but when you dissect the plant, you're looking into a cellular structure which is microscale in calibration. So when I move my cursor in this microscopic image, and we try to track the multi-walled carbon nanotubes, we were really clueless as to what happened. Initially, when the carbon nanotubes entered into the seed coat, we could track it there. we could understand that they entered the seed pod, and we saw one of the carbon nanotubes jutting out of it. But as you enter the hierarchy of the plant system, it becomes very complex. Nature has its own complexities, and for the human mind to unravel those complexities is a huge or a Himalayan challenge for us. So we could see by studying the anatomical changes, by slicing whatever was growing in the soil, we had to periodically pull out samples and sacrifice our plants and put them under microscopes. So what we did was, which usually scientists would not prefer to do, was to put the actual samples under a knife and look at the mathematical correlation or the statistical correlation of the cellular size with the amount of seed priming. And this really was a very successful insight which we made, because when you look at this image, you would find that as compared to control, the cellular structure of the plant, which we popularly called as xylem and phloem, were much bigger in size, which in other words mean that the chemical factory inside the plant which produces or which is responsible for the exchange of gases, liquid or solid or nutrients with respect to the soil has actually enhanced its capacity. So just as an analogy, I can make you understand that if I want to set up a plant and I enhance the volume of the boiler I set up in that chemical factory, I would be doing a faster production, a bigger production. So a similar thing happened. The xylem is responsible for exchange inside the root of certain nutrients in which it is put into, and it also helps the uptake of water. And this is what we were encountering for as a motivation of our work. We said right in the beginning that the real motivation of starting this work about 6 years back was the water table was going down, and how do you empower the plant to allow it to capture or make it sustainable in the sense that wherever it finds water vapor, it will be able to latch onto it. So this extensive root hair or this extensive network of hair which we were able to produce by priming the seeds with carbon nanotubes allows the plant to, or the root network, not only grow deeper but extend its network into X, Y, and Z directions in all three axes. So much so that it makes the plant more powerful in gathering whatever nutrients it can from the soil. And that is why the cellular structure becomes really big. And it has an enhanced capacity to produce probably more amount of food, and also propel the growth of maybe after 30 days, 120 days, and 135 days. So we also looked into different kinds of plants, because if you do that experiment only in wheat, you might be questioned that yes, it worked for wheat, but will it work for rice, or will it work for any other crop? So we undertook this experiment, and we found out that rice also gave us very good results, and which you're able to see the photographic evidence on your screens. The interesting part here is the shoot grows to some extent, but we really don't want it to grow very high. The reason being, from inside the earth, the roots can gather water and other nutrients, but if the shoot grows very high up in the air, it becomes susceptible to fast moving winds, and the crop can grow down when there are extremes of nature. For example, uh, if there's high speed rain or high speed wind which blows. So this is something really encouraging, that the shoot grows to some extent, but not as high as you would really not want it to be. But as compared with the control, the roots were really growing much deeper. And this is safe for us because this is embedded inside the soil, and it becomes rock solid for the plant to stay in the soil and become more sustainable. But if the shoot grows out, then again you become too dependent on the extremes or vagaries of nature like hailstorm, which would affect the growth of the plant or the productivity of the plant later on. So there are very minute details you have to look into when you're talking about such a kind of a research. We took care of that, and we tried to study that and also record it, and uh, we have put this in terms of the pictures. But you have to look beyond that, because all these statistics have to be scientifically proven and scientifically recorded. And what you see here is a graphical representation of our root length and shoot length. And as I've said, the root lengths do not significantly change as compared to almost a doubling of the shoot length, which is very promising. Now, apart from this, we have to look into very peculiar mechanisms. The assessments have to be done on a nanoscale, and so much so because when you're dealing with such a research, you would know that the only group of people who work in genetics are working in a very similar motivation, but their line of action is very different from ours. Because when you work with genetics, you are actually targeting the DNA and making significant changes in the primary genetics or the primary DNA structure, which is very controversial because in many places like India, the transgenetic or transgenic crops have been really opposed by environmentalists and ecologists. And we didn't want to enter into that kind of a controversy. So we had to look into or assess the damage which is done to DNA. And thankfully, we did not make any significant changes to the DNA structure of our wheat crop or oats or rice. But there were very promising results when we wanted to find out what significant changes in terms of the gain in elements would happen inside the plants. So we have scientifically recorded that by doing an ICP-MS analysis. And even beyond that, we have tried to track the carbon nanotubes inside the xylem and phloem, which I mentioned just 10 minutes back. That right from the seed coat, you still have to find out what happened to your carbon nanotube once it's inside the cellular system. So we conducted a very unique experiment. We took clues from what is called cancer research. In cancer research, which is conducted inside a human body, there's something called injection of a dye to identify whatever cells have overgrown or turned into gray cells. And that dye, when it wets the the inside of the cellular structure of a human body would give you a clue as to where there's unwanted tumor growth. So we thought we'll use a similar dye and piggyback onto our carbon nanotube, and then it would be easier to conduct fluorescence studies and see whether the dye fluoresces or it actually glows, in simple words, when it enters the cellular structure. So this image which you see, this colorful image, which contains the orange and the yellow portions, tells you that carbon nanotubes have entered these systems. And up to a certain vasculature, we would find that probably the carbon nanotubes have come and parked themselves here. They contribute chemically and physically to interface with the cellular structure of the plant, and they ensure that all these mechanisms, which also include photosynthesis, the enhancement of the photosynthesis is what we found out is being undertaken at this point. And beyond this point, which is the xylem and phloem, which we call in the terminology of plant biologists as vasculature, the carbon nanotubes do not prefer to go beyond this point, or the plant does not prefer the carbon nanotubes to let it go beyond this point. Now, the major reason or this peculiar mechanism is because beyond this point, there's a danger of carbon nanotubes, which is an inorganic material, and may have a possibility of creating some kind of a toxicity or detrimental effects in the food chain. So this vasculature acts like a filtrate or a membrane, where it stops this otherwise useful inorganic nanoscale feature from entering into the food chain by disallowing the carbon nanotube to go beyond this point. So this was like a barrier. This barrier was created naturally, and we had absolutely no role in it. And this only happens when the plant is acting as per its instincts. You do not tinker with its DNA. You are not doing anything to its genetic premises. And when you are doing it to harmonize organic and inorganic interface, you would ensure that the plant is in perfect synchronization with nature and nothing unusual is happening. And this you would realize that in our case, none of the plant or seedlings turned black, which is an indication that plant does not accept any kind of treatment you want to give it from outside. So this was really encouraging, and we wanted to find out more vigorously what happened to the carbon nanotubes in the vasculature. So we conducted different kind of anatomical experiments, and you really had to have a surgical precision to do that, because slicing a plant sample is a huge challenge. When you're working with an inorganic material, you might be able to easily slice it, fracture it by giving a liquid nitrogen treatment. But plants do not allow you to do that. So these beautiful images which you see here is a work of a scholar who took a long time to understand how you do not hurt the artistic nature or the artistic portions which are built inside by natural phenomena, but at the same time you're able to investigate by doing some kind of a destructive testing. So although we destroyed these samples because you had to pull out these samples, the plant had to be dead, to undertake this kind of a microscopic treatment. But it was very important to understand that whether the vasculature or uh, this parallel arrangement of the plant has the parking of all your carbon nanotubes, which we allowed it to enter from the seed front. And this is what we found. All these hair-like structures are actually the carbon nanotubes which we made it enter, and these are in millions. Because although it was a very small quantity, but when it comes to nanoscale features, these hair-like or strand-like fibers are individually turned into millions of those snakes which enter into the seed fold. So it was very safe to assume that all these carbon nanotubes did park themselves and they were comfortably placed in this seed membrane, which we called as a natural filtrate. And we were in perfect harmony with the plant system. And so we were encouraged to now test the final yield of the plant and look into the other parameters, just to know that the whole exercise is productive enough. Because if it is not productive, you're not able to get the number of grains which are different from control, or the net weight of the plant, there is no gain in that, or the spikes which grow into the plant, which you see as yellow grain in the fields. And also it becomes a theme for many of our movies also, because many of the songs in the movies are shot in those beautiful fields, especially if you look at the Punjabi movies, because we form the food tray of India. So this belt of Punjab, Haryana and parts of UP, the focus or the theme of the culture is the agriculture production. So we had to ensure that this whole scientific activity really landed us into that mode of higher yield. And with pleasure, I would inform that we found an enhancement in the seed weight and also the seed count or the grain count. And this was really encouraging because the whole exercise was successful without having any damage to the DNA, and ensuring that the carbon nanotubes do not enter these grains which you consume afterwards. Now, this had to be again scientifically proven, and we had to take another portion of studies, which is called the cell viability test. And this was undertaken by testing the nanotoxicity in the cell lines or the cellular lines of our throat, or the cells which are found in our throat or esophagus or even the stomach. And to our great pleasure, we found that the cell viability was above 80%, which means all those prime seeds which we tested for these cell lines were encouraging, and they had absolutely no toxic effects, and they wouldn't cause any kind of a cancer, because when we ranged it between 70 to 90 microgram per liter as our composition, or as our characteristic of inorganic nanoscale particles which we fed to our organic plants, nothing untoward happened. So these cell line studies made it very clear that it is perfectly safe to consume these wheat or these rice and oats. But definitely before they're put into market, a lot of other studies have to be undertaken. But any research which is done in lab and in field conditions will take some time to validate. But as of now, we were able to perform our duty to ensure that everything which was hypothesized initially was in order, and we were able to go ahead and publish those results with a lot of confidence. And at this point, I can say that these are really encouraging if you want to move into the area of sustainable agriculture using this kind of an approach. Just to make you understand that this, the number of students, I'm just trying to finish the first portion of my study, and I would request that the moderator um, of this session can throw open questions to the audience, because I finished with my first portion in this first 1 hour of session. And these are the researchers who have actually undertaken the study and handled different parts. So if the house will be open for discussion, and I would encourage any questions from the audience before I undertake the second portion, which is advancement in functional materials, which is an entirely different topic.
Sir, can we take the questions after completion of your this second session also?
The only issue is we'll be totally off track, because this first part of advancement in functional materials was entirely different and unrelated to the second portion.
Okay.
So it would be a kind of a break if people are interested to take up questions. I mean, we would just, I mean, if it is comfortable to the audience to, because by the time we get into the second portion, it'll be another 1 hour maybe, and we'll be on a different track altogether. So
Yes,
if you wouldn't mind taking up questions. What do you say?
yes, sir, definitely. There is some questions. I can take them one by one.
Okay, sure, sure. Yeah, if the audience is comfortable typing them in the uh, chat box, that would be okay. Or if they want to come on audio, that would be wonderful.
Just a minute, sir. I'm just doing it.
Okay, sure.
So there is one question by one of the participant
Okay.
is any other one-dimensional nanomaterial being used in agriculture? If yes, then what is its toxicity as compared to CNTs?
See, we have a very limited option as of now. The reason being, the one-dimensional nanomaterials which have been used into agriculture, the the favorite candidates is carbon nanotube. The reason being, many people assume that plant already has a lot of carbon in it, and it would be much easier to allow carbon nanotubes, which although has a very different crystalline structure as compared to the carbon in plants, plants will have maybe a very amorphous structure. And to understand the carbon in plants is really not easy, because at every stage uh, of a plant physiology, the composition of that carbon also changes. And for us to understand it will take some time. But as of now, carbon nanotubes are the favorite candidates. And if you put any other material, there's a possibility of toxicity being triggered in plants which are especially edible.
Okay,
I hope this answers the question.
definitely.
Yeah, if the participant is still doubtful, you may re-ask, or you
Yes,
may
sir.
redirect your question. Sure.
Participants, if you are satisfied with the question, okay, so now I will take the another question. So
Sure.
is there any other option rather than using carbon nanotubes?
Yeah, many research groups, not us, but other groups have used zero-dimensional nanomaterials, especially gold and silver, and some other ferrite-based particles. Because iron-based particles have been useful for crops as an element. So some groups have used it, and I believe they have received some positive results. But our hypothesis was based on the morphology of carbon nanotubes, because we believe that carbon nanotubes has a snake-like feature or a snake-like structure which can allow it to enter into the complex plant system. So at different portions of the plant, there are membranes or filtering mechanisms, and that is why the plant does not allow any foreign material to enter when it comes to accepting inorganic particles inside it. And that is why even if you try to inject something into a plant, the plant will either wilt down or turn black or gray, and it would rather die rather than accepting a foreign material. You can try this small experiment at home. And we do it with all our plants in the drawing room, which we plant, or maybe in your offices. If you try to put some kind of a colored water, the plant would not accept it. It would not even accept a dye, any colored dye inside it. A living plant. I'm not saying about something which has been offshooted or offrooted. You might say that many cosmetic flowers are artificially colored, but you need to understand that those are taken out of soil. Right? You can do it artificially. You can color it artificially by just putting it in colored dyed water. But those plants are not living. Right? We can only allow those plants in a flower vase, but that plant cannot live by itself by accepting any foreign dye. I hope this answers the question.
Yes. So let's take one last question that is asking that to tell something about the recycling of these contemporary materials.
I didn't get the question. Recycling of
contemporary materials. Actually, it's not so specific. It's not asking some particular material, I think.
Okay, but what do you want to know about recyclability? Because say here we need to understand that this is not a normal product we are talking about, right? This is not a synthetic product. We are talking about our food crop, something which has to be served on a plate. And what we want to recycle here is what portion of the plant are you talking about, or you want to talk about recycling the carbon nanotubes which entered the system? If I can get this clarification, then
there be some feasibility for recycling of carbon nanotubes? Are they recyclable, sir?
Once they have entered into this plant system, we won't be able to extract this carbon nanotubes. We do not have any technology which allows us to do that.
Yes, sir.
Because from any natural system, extraction will be very difficult. Very difficult. But it's a good idea, and it's a good question, because it sets me ringing. It sets me thinking also on a different platform that maybe we can undertake such an activity, right? And if somebody would maybe wish to collaborate on this aspect, I would welcome them to do that.
So actually, this is a question from my side. That have we reached up to that stage that we should think about recycling? Because still we are, I think, in a development stage of these carbon nanotubes. particularly the applications or something else?
See, the beauty of this research is that we have to ensure that you already have reached the end before you propose this technology.
Yes, sir.
We have to ensure that all loose ends are taken care of. And that is why we had to undertake those cell line studies. We had to make sure that we get the best of grains, the grain number, the seed weight, every aspect has to be covered before you float this technology into the market, right?
Yes,
So
sir.
maybe a pharmaceutical formulation is easier to float, but something which the whole population is eating, right? You understand the statistics or the numbers which are involved, because you're talking about three major crops in the world: wheat, rice, and oats, right?
Yes, sir.
And the 100% of this population of the world is going to consume this if this technology has to enter the agriculture market.
Yes, sir.
So the feasibility, the recyclability, you're absolutely right. We have to test it before it gets into the production system or the food chain. So definitely, this aspect has to be covered. Surely it has to be.
So that's all from the participant side. The queries that they have raised.
Okay,
So,
right.
yes, sir.
Yeah. So I will start with the next portion, which is very different, and this will take the participants to an entirely different journey. And this is the reason why I wanted to take up the questions right after the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Um, yeah. So just give me a moment before I start sharing.
Yes, sir.
So I think, is the screen visible to you?
It's visible, sir.
It's visible. So just give me a 2-minute break so that I can just clear my throat and
Okay.
yeah, yeah. Just give me a moment, right? Okay. Thank you. So my email and uh, my affiliation to the institutes are given here. If the participants are interested, they can take down before we start the next part of the presentation.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll just be back.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Rajiv, I'm back. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir. You can
Okay.
start the presentation. Yes, sir.
Sure. So thank you very much. We'll continue with the second portion. And just before we do that, uh, I wanted to add that in this endeavor to introduce carbon nanotubes into plants, we are trying to also ensure that plants are able to counter um, extremes of nature, for example, drought. So on that aspect, we have extended our research, but still we have not been able to publish it. As soon as it is published, or there's something which is worth proving, I would probably introduce it, but I just wanted to make a mention of it before I really ended and started the second portion. So in this endeavor of discussing contemporary material technologies, the core, another core area in which we work, which is nanocomposites and coatings, and I would put it as advancements in functional materials part 2. In the first, if I say the episode of my talk, I was talking about 1D material, but in this particular section, I would talk about a 2D material. And this 2D material is very different from what we talked or discussed in the first portion. And before I do that, I would probably try to define nanotechnology in a different sense, but using my favorite example of a plant. So just for the sake of audience, because here we'll be talking more in terms of some fundamental structures as compared to the first part of the talk, which is totally application based. Although this is also based on a application which is coatings, but I want you to see how nanotechnology can be redefined using something as simple as a leaf. So is the second slide visible to you? Dr. Rajiv, is the second slide visible, or any of the participants can help me? Yeah, just want to be sure. Is it visible? You can maybe just.
Yes, visible, sir.
It is visible, right? Okay, thank you. Thank you. So if you simply take a leaf and you draw a scale uh, underneath that leaf, you would know that a normal vision would pertain anything between a few centimeters. So I've drawn a scale of 10 centimeters below this image of a leaf. And this is what you see in life, in everyday life or routine life, in your gardens, or places wherever there is a leaf or a plant which is growing. Now, if I try to enhance my vision and take it very close and get down to the next logical scale, which is 1 centimeter, and you'll also see subsequently uh, on the left portion of this image, you see 10 raised to the minus 2 meters. So I'm deliberately doing that uh, so that when we reach the point of focus, which is 10 raised to the power minus 9 meters, you would know that you're looking at nanoscale features. And that nanoscale feature can also be explored in a natural product like a leaf. So at 1 centimeter, you can see the side ribs and the mid rib of that leaf. When you go beyond that, that is 10 raised to the power minus 3 meters or 1 millimeter, you would know that you start to see the individual features of that leaf because you're getting very close to it. Now, this can be done with a simple lens, a handheld lens. But if you have to enter the micron scale or the cellular scale of the leaf, I'm saying cellular because you start to see the cellular structure, you would need a specialized kind of a microscope, not a simple lens or not a combination of lenses. Because the human vision is impaired beyond maybe 200 microns, or maybe if you're too good, you get to see 150 microns. This statement you would also read in many of your books, that any hair follicle is around, if it is thick enough, it is 100 microns, otherwise it is 75 microns. But human vision, a 6x6 corrected vision, cannot go beyond that scale. So this cellular structure is 100 microns, and we are almost halfway to 10 raised to the minus 4 meters. And the individual leaf cells, which contains the stomata, which was a part of my study at MIT when I was visiting a fellow there. The people at MIT, the Strano group, is looking very closely at the dynamics of a plant. Otherwise, the plant is very static. We don't see it moving unless it moves by wind or any external force. But actually, there's a lot of dynamics involved, and that dynamics is not comprehended by human beings. This is something very fundamental I'm sharing with you, but I thought I'll do that because it will make the discussion more interesting. This stomata is in a constant movement as per the requirement of the plant, because this stomata is the only opening which a plant has above the ground. Inside the ground, it has roots, and those roots allow a lot of things to be uptaken. But a stomata is responsible for the exchange of gases, the exchange of liquids on the surface of the plant. So we call it the abaxial and the adaxial portion of a leaf. There are more stomata underside of the leaf as compared on the upper side. And this is a kind of a protective mechanism which the plant has, and it does not allow anything unusual to be taken inside. Only whatever it requires to undertake photosynthesis, it will allow to enter into these pores, and these pores open and close. And this movement is not really well studied and well thought of. The reason being because the scientific community has been probably ignoring these dynamics of this movement, especially those who are not working in plant biology. I'm not saying the botanist will ignore it, but the material scientist or the engineers who would get into agriculture would probably have to look into these dynamics. But our discussion is not focused on this, but let's go beyond that and get into the closer of the scale, which is 1000 nanometers or 1 micron. You would see a nucleus of a leaf cell. Now, this nucleus at 10 raised to the minus 6 meters is like the nucleus is always the center of action, where all activity in terms of making of the food of the plant should take place. And for that matter, any natural thing or synthetic thing we think of, the nucleus is considered to be the center of activity, or the CPU, okay, the central processing unit of that organism. So remember, now we have got down to 1000 nanometers. and our focus is now on the nucleus of the cell. And if we go beyond that, we go down to 100 nanometers, or we go down to 10 nanometers, or we go down to 1 nanometer, and even beyond that, you would realize that even in nature, the nanoscale features are the real building blocks. So by default, nature has something very common to nanotechnology when it comes to deciding that this scale has a certain point of focus, because the DNA, which is the actual building block, the individual DNA strands or the chromatin in the nucleus of the cell will range anything between 1 to 100 nanometers. So from this discussion, it is really clear that anything meaningful, even in nature, would start at nanoscale. Because if I go down below nanoscale to picometers or to femtometers, you would realize that you are actually encountering individual atoms or individual portions or individual electrons or protons, which at this point of time cannot be said to be of any use because we cannot manipulate that. But whatever is under human manipulation is, I'm trying to move my cursor around that, is the nanoscale features. So even in future, when we would be creating things in harmony with nature, and I'm always citing this example because one of the major focuses of our group's research is towards plants and sustainable agriculture. We have to think of harmonizing nature with nanotechnology. So with this aspect in mind, I would come down to the point of discussion for this session, which is nanocomposites, and I'll try to make it brief just by introducing 0D, 1D, and 2D nanomaterials, which are actually functional materials which can be introduced into a matrix, and in this case it's a polymer matrix, and you can change the sequence of properties for a polymer matrix by introducing these small materials at nanoscale. The only caution here is when these materials are having an individual existence as a nanoscale material, not as aggregates or not as agglomerates, then only the efficacy in changing the properties of the matrix can be realized. Otherwise, there will be only incremental changes in the matrix you are encountering. Now, this is something very significant which you should understand. Because many times you believe that if you just mix any matrix with an aggregate or a powdered nanomaterial, which does not have the requisite surfaces to volume ratio, or it does not maintain that percentage, you will still be about to, or you do not maintain the same aspect ratio, you still will be able to get the requisite results. It does not happen. It might happen by hit and trial, or you get results which are inconsistent. But if you want to get consistent results, we have to ensure that the loadings which are used are in very small quantities, so that you do not allow aggregation of these nanomaterials, because they do have a tendency to aggregate. That is a natural tendency to get into a micron scale feature, and I'll show you why it happens. And if you do not have that high aspect ratio, that is why I have put a star around these observations. So the surface energy which you encounter in the end is not very high, and it will not make desirable changes in the matrix. So moving ahead with that, I'm just showing you an image which we took about 10 years back of the same clay which we were trying to explore on nanoscale. Maybe about, so I think this image is more than 10 years back, maybe more than a decade. At that time, we had absolutely no clue of what the real structure of this clay is at a nanoscale. So just around, if you see the scale, I'm putting a cursor around that picture. You would see this is 1000 nanometers, and this is something anything between 6 to about 7 microns in size. Now, this was a popular loading or a popular nanofiller till about 1990s, when you wanted to reduce the cost of your polymer, and you wanted to ensure that there's not much change in density, but your product can be filled even up to 30 to 40% of this clay in the form of a talc, and you would be able to save cost for that polymer product and get maybe useful thermal properties. So it was really limited because beyond this, the vision didn't work. And that is the reason why I wanted to show those slides based on a leaf, that if you want to see a leaf as a leaf, there's no harm, but unless you get into a nanoscale vision or a perception, you won't be able to think or think out of the box and make that technology different. And that was the case with the whole scientific world. We were stuck into micron scale fillers. And because we did not have tools to explore the nanoscale morphology or nanostructure of these clays, our hands were limited and we were tied to go beyond this technology. But I would show you in a moment how this was resolved, because when you took images of a simple polymeric film at a nanoscale, at a micron scale, you could see no difference even when you added this filler. So no major difference could be discerned or it could be distinguished. The reason being, even if we try to prove that some major changes in mechanical properties would be undertaken, because our vision was hampered. Unless you had something like an atomic force microscope, which is just now displayed on your visuals, and these brown images on the base of the screen give you the actual story of these plastic films which you see on your top of the screen. So these two images, when observed at nanoscale, had a very different kind of a structure and morphology and assembly, which otherwise was never distinguished. Reason being, nobody had access to atomic force microscopy or these kind of advanced tools. And obviously, you could not go beyond thinking about what changes this would bring to the nanostructures. But I would give you very interesting images, not only at nanoscale, but at macro scale, where these products are actually used. So I'm talking about automotive coatings. Now I've introduced what is the focus here. Automobiles we use every day, and these automobiles have a majorly metallic body, and that metallic body has to be protected from the outside environment by putting a barrier in the form of a polymeric coating, or if I use a common man's language, you would call it a paint. But we don't realize that that paint can also have a very specific technology introduced into it. If we are looking into a nanoscale, and that nanoscale can bring about very significant changes into properties at a macro scale. So we need to understand this hierarchy. The hierarchy is like this. Whatever I introduced as a filler at nanoscale has a higher significant impact when I turn this into a product, which is my coating or a paint film. Now, how would we do that? Just to give you an idea, I'm taking a small example on another very popular 2D material, graphene, which was awarded the Nobel Prize in 2010, which is one of the most recent prizes given in the area of nanotechnology. And this was said to revolutionize the whole scientific scenario. So this example shows that this 2D material, when seen at nanoscale, can significantly alter its electronic properties and even mechanical properties if somehow you create a finger, and that finger is actually an AFM tip, and you twist and turn this 2D material into different conformations or different shapes. So if I just twist the ear, when I say ear, it actually means the ear, EAR, the ears of this beautiful graphene sheet which you see here. If I'm able to twist these ears, the electronic properties drastically change. They change magically. And this actually makes this material very exciting. That just by making such minute changes in its structures, you can change its electronic and mechanical properties. You can do many revolutionary things inside polymer matrices. Because if you introduce graphene into polymer matrices, you are introducing a conducting material, and that conducting material has its specific dynamics, because you can change the electronic properties to an extent wherein there's huge difference in converting an insulator into a conductor. And this can be done by introducing very small portions of graphene into a matrix which is non-conducting. Now, if I say this, I'm actually defining a huge gamut of applications. And these applications for these hybrid materials or nanocomposite materials would vary anything between having a conductive coatings to flame retardant materials, to light emitting diodes, which were again recognized as a Nobel discovery, because LEDs were recently recognized in the area of chemistry and physics, to something which is as expensive as a solar cell and not very popular right now, to creating gas sensors or creating lightweight mechanically reinforced material, to something like shape memory, which the director of NIT also mentioned this morning in the inaugural session, to something like anti-corrosive coatings or scratch and abrasion resistant coatings, to medical science like dental materials and so forth. So you would understand that this particular expansion of applications can be done when you understand the science of introducing 2D materials into polymer matrices. Now, before we proceed with the science or before we proceed into mechanism, it is important to know where these materials have been introduced as real life applications. So what you see here is a step assist, which is a part of an automobile. And herein the automobile industry had to encounter with a great failure, because whenever the step assist had to undergo a flexural weight or fatigue, this kind of a product was very difficult to synthesize. Reason being, we had a very poor dimensional stability, especially because every time a person enters or steps onto the step assist, this is more commonly found in cars with the pilot cars which accompany the vehicular movements of the VIPs or the ceremonial heads. You would realize that the national security guards who accompany our prime minister, they have to stand on the outer portion of the car many a times. So these pilot vehicles will always encounter differentiating weights, and it is very difficult to design this mechanical product because of the kind of sinusoidal weight which it encounters. Um, so what is promising here is to introduce dimensional stability and interior stability and durability by using a nanocomposite instead of a simple polymer material. And that is where this nanocomposite became really marketable. And apart from this, the other promising thing was the property of flame retardance, which could be introduced when you used a clay reinforced polymer. Now, the clay reinforcement ensures some kind of a barrier, which we need to understand quickly, because I understand. I think we are going very close to the end of the presentation in next maybe 15-20 minutes. So I would just run through the kind of property enhancements which you would encounter, and there would vary anything between the changes in mechanical, chemical, or the surface properties, as well as the economic considerations which are important when you have to design a product. Now, what really functionalizes these materials is the rich chemistry of these clays, because the clay is a simple ceramic, but if you really want to look deeper into its chemistry, it is really promising, as you can compatibilize these nanomaterials with any polymer matrix you want to include them into. So with this promising feature, we wanted to synthesize polymer nanocomposite coatings. And what we selected was polyurethane, because polyurethane is one of the most popular formulations which are used in automotive coatings. So what we wanted was, we wanted to use the same polyurethane by introducing a very small portion of 2D nanomaterials into it and forming a nanocomposite. But sometimes it is easier said than done unless you look into what are the different approaches of processing these nanocomposites. So what I'm showing on this slide is different synthesizing techniques of making a polymer or polyurethane clay nanocomposite. And there's not a set solution to designing these nanocomposites, because if you're using a thermosetting formulation, you have to look into a different approach as compared to when you're looking at a thermoplastic. Because a thermoplastic has to be differently synthesized as compared to a thermosetting. The selection of a solvent or the selection of a monomer or a curing agent has to be very different. So you really have to customize your nanocomposite formulation and your synthesis or processing technique. Now, if you are working in research areas in nanocomposite, you would understand that synthesis is really a daunting task which has to be given a due weightage. Because if you don't do that, you do not end up making a nanocomposite. So this slide is actually showing you the physics and the chemistry of how a nanocomposite is formed. This polymer chain, which I'm showing you with a cursor, if it does not enter, let me remind you of the same image I had shown you, wherein at 1 micron you saw a large size non-crystalline, maybe a satellite or a UFO-like image. You did not realize that each clay platelet has a nanoscale feature. It's a nanoplatelet, and that cannot be done if you're not using the correct synthesis technique. So this is a real scientific hurdle which you have to cross before making a nanocomposite coating. Otherwise, you would end up making a microcomposite, which is sometimes not very useful. And as I had said in the beginning, there'll be only incremental changes in the properties. Now, I've tried to explain this phenomena by making a small cartoon for you, or this caricature, wherein most of the research groups who have worked in this area would talk about intercalation. And intercalation and exfoliation is what they aim at. And these polymer chains have to intercalate this primary particle, which is actually a stacking of each of the individual nanoplatelets. So when these nanoplatelets really integrate physically and chemically at a nanoscale or a molecular scale, then only you get a real nanocomposite. And this I've tried to signify with this drawing. How do you actually characterize it, and how would you know that a nanocomposite has been formed? The first kind of a characterization technique which you would use is an XRD, which is X-ray diffraction and very popularly known. And when you see a destruction of this crystalline structure associated with these clay platelets, you would know that you ended up making a nanocomposite. But a word of caution I want to put here is, do not be misled into the structure shown by an XRD or the spectra shown by XRD, because you're using 95% polymer and only 5% nanofiller. Your nanofiller weight is less than 5%. So anyway, you would see the majority of the polymer-like non-crystalline features. And XRD, being a bulk technique, would not give you the real story behind it. So what we have to do is we have to correlate by conducting a transmission electron microscopy, wherein the sample size is very small and you are looking at a scale of around 200 to maybe 100 or less than 100 nanometers. And you see the actual clay platelets or the 2D nanomaterials which we were trying to explore for a nanocomposite. So you can correlate this and you can really create a barrier inside the bulk, as I'm showing here, and you can study this barrier by doing some kind of a barrier experiment at a macro scale and then correlating those kinetics of the entry of the external water molecules with the nanoscale feature. But I'll not get into this. I would rather skip this and get into a more realistic thing which you would appreciate in the last 15 minutes of this presentation. And we also have to take up some maybe questions for the discussion. A pristine automotive coating which you see on your left is turned into something very exciting, and this is a self-assembly of the hard segments of these coatings right onto the surface, which can be investigated or discerned by atomic force microscopy. And that is why I said if you have a tool like this with you, then you can do a lot of things, and you can understand that a pristine coating, when introduced with just 3 weight% clay platelets, can change the nanomorphology of these coatings.
सर वो ड्राफ्ट कर दिया उन्होंने मीटिंग कुछ हो गया वो हो गया लेफ्ट सारी लेफ्ट करने लग गए अब पूरा अपना बीच में ही लेफ्ट हो गया हेलो sir, I think you have left the meeting room by mistake. Yeah, please retry it. Bye. वो ऑफिस में होगा ना तो डाटा में होगा लैम होगा Dear participants, please stay tuned. Yes, he is back.
Yeah, I didn't realize when did I leave the meeting room. At what slide were we when I think I got disconnected?
So you were discussing nano composites for
Participant,
automobile.
help me. Which slide were we when I got disconnected? And I didn't realize it.
Just a few minutes back, sir, you are disconnected.
Just a few minutes back. So what was the last slide which was visible? Because I was continuing with my presentation, little realizing that I'm all alone.
No, we don't remember what exactly was the slide, but just a minute back.
Any participant help me with which particular slide was I when I left the meeting room? Okay, so what? Maybe I'll just guess that I was somewhere here.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, sir. This was the slide.
Pardon?
Sir,
This was the slide which
people are
we were
in the chat box that this exactly was the slide.
This exactly was okay. Thank you so much. Okay. So this actually is the real crux of the problem, because here we are looking at the automotive coating, which has been modified into a nanocomposite coating, and the symmetry which you see on the surface of these coatings, which can be investigated by atomic force microscopy, you would understand that the symmetry and the nanomorphology we create on a pristine polyurethane coating will result in better properties. And I was just trying to explain that example. Um, at many a times, your automobile undergoes some kind of impact due to an unfortunate accident or a malfunctioning engine. And that is where the coatings come off, and these images are actual real images of coatings which we have put on metallic substrates. And what we are trying to show here is that if these coatings can be made better or better adhere to the substrates, the functionality of protecting the substrate becomes much better for a nanocomposite coating as compared to a clear coating or a pristine coating. And how I show that is in terms of creating an AFM image of a pristine coating which you see on your left hand side, and on the right hand side you see a nanocomposite coating. I would be able to better explain how this nanocomposite coating behaves better under impact conditions, because what happens under an impact, the portion of nanocomposite coatings which comes off the substrate is much higher for a pristine coating as compared to a nanocomposite coating. And let me explain it with this simple drawing I've made, wherein this crisscross formation is actually the polymeric chains, and because we are dealing with a cross-linked polymer, and how it can be better protected when you make it or when you introduce these nanoplatelets. So just as an analogy, you would remember that whenever we are laying concrete or when we are making concrete portions in our building, we have to reinforce cement with these small metallic wires. And these metallic wires, or if we simply call them saria, has to be interlocked with even a smaller metallic portion or metallic element, which gives that continuity to those iron rods, which reinforces the concrete and finally gives strength to the whole composite. So my analogy is actually to tell you that that small flexible wire which interlocks the huge iron rods which reinforce the pillar are the real focus of strength. And similarly, these nanoplatelets are where the real focus of strength lies, wherein they interlock these polymeric chains and drastically change their properties and make the chemical and the physical reinforcements happen. So with this drawing, you'll be able to understand this, and this has been recently published also in 2019, and I'm just displaying the volume number if you want to refer to a more in-depth study into how this polyurethane nanocomposite coating becomes more efficient with the formation of a nanocomposite. And just to give you another small example before we really end up this presentation is how does the scratch morphology changes. I've tried to pseudo color or artificially color these images and look them very closely. All these are macro scale images of scratches on a surface of metal. You would observe that a pristine coating, when it comes off due to scratching or what we call mar on the surface, there's a lot of corrugation or a lot of unevenness. While a nanocomposite coating is really smooth, and this will allow a nanocomposite coating to be more sustainable on a surface and having a better adhesion and making it more mar resistant. Why I say mar? Because mar is the terminology which we use in the area of coatings for scratches. Okay, and many people who are from mechanical engineering background or tribology background might understand the importance of having a mar resistance for any surface coating. And this in turn would ensure that you have a better corrosion resistance when you put these coatings under salt resistance. And that is what we observed. So these nano composites actually end up making a better corrosion resistance and a better mar resistance and a mechanically more sustainable coating. So I would end on this note, and I would rather encourage discussions on this topic rather than showing you more results, because I think we'll be diving more deep and we'll lose out on the surface or the proportionality of the science, which probably all of you would like to discuss with me. So thank you very much, and I would again say that the research group which was involved um, in this area, I've shown you that image, and all these researchers which make up my research group contribute towards different aspects on nanoscale technologies on which we work, and we term it as a contemporary, if not very advanced, material technology. If you allow me to tag my research in those terms. So thank you very much for the attention or the undivided attention I got. So much so that even when I left the meeting, I did not realize that I am not a part of this short-term course, and I was talking to myself. But that is how technology has landed us into. And thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you
I
so
would
much.
take up any questions.
Yes, we have called some queries from the participants. I will just see some of those. One of those queries is it possible to use coated nano carbon fibers for electromagnetic shielding applications?
Why not? Why not? The possibilities which are there are immense, and a lot of possibilities are unexplored. So if you do a conformal coating or a nanoscale coating on these particles or on these fibers, you can make up any kind of an application, electromagnetic for that matter. So there's nothing which can stop you. The possibilities are immense.
Right. One of the similar questions that we have received from our participants is how nanocomposite coatings are different from the normal coatings, the micro coatings, etc.
Okay, I thought I have been speaking for this almost for 1 hour, and
Right.
I was able to put across the point. Um, what really matters in the hierarchy is the nanomorphology, and which I was trying to show when I was dealing from this meeting, and I was totally isolated, and I was in my own world in
No,
own
sir, you were
thoughts.
isolated for just a moment only.
I know, but yeah. So just to remind the audience that when we were dealing, that is the whole point I was stressing when I showed the actual pristine coatings, and I was trying to compare it with the nanocomposite coatings. Because when you see the actual product and when you want to see the performance, and you want to see not only the nanoscale differences, which very artistically my group has shown in their publications or in their reports, what we need to understand, the actual product has a significant changes in their performance properties, which we just saw in terms of corrosion resistance as well as the
Mar
impact resistance. Yeah, mar and scratch also. So tribological changes were there. So these changes are significant because they have all the impact on the service life or service prediction or life prediction of any automobile, because that is the whole purpose of making a coating, the protection of the substrate.
I suppose there are no more questions. We've already had one round earlier before. So eventually, I would like to extend my thanks for the nice illustrative talk.
I'm just interrupting you, Rajiv, because I see a question in the chat box.
Is it possible to do a quoting on aluminium 7075 on?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, one aluminium grade onto another aluminium grade.
So I would like to answer this question because I don't want to make the participants feel incomplete,
Right,
right?
right. Please go
So
ahead.
let me encounter with your permission and with permission of
Yeah,
Rakesh sir.
sure,
Yeah.
sure, sir.
Yeah. So the answer to this question is
Acha.
if you understand the compatibility between a coating and its substrate, and you understand the surface dynamics, then why not you can use a formulation, but that formulation has to be customized as per the grade of the metal you're using. For it, so aluminum 7075 maybe have a different composition as compared to aluminum 6061, and that grade has to be compatibilized. But the using of nanocomposite coatings will give you a wider range of formulations because you can play around with the chemistry as well as the physics. And playing around with physics and chemistry at nanoscale and molecular scale uh, gives you a better understanding of the compatibility between the substrate as well as the surface coating. So I think in short, I've tried to answer the question, but if still you want more clues, you're free to email me. Right. Thank you, Rajiv. Thank you, Rajiv, for the.
So in the end, basically, I would like to extend my heartiest thanks for the nice illustrative talk wherein you talked about the research aspects related to the application of carbon nanotubes in agriculture. And in the second talk, basically, you talked about coating, nanocomposite coatings. I must say it was described in a very lucid manner. I, on behalf of organizing team, would like to thank you once again for contributing as a speaker during our course for the first day. We are highly indebted for this act of kindness. We hope to have similar such interactions in coming future. Thank you once again, sir. Thanks for
Yeah,
coming.
I would earnestly wish that we would rather have a physical interaction
That
and
yes,
we are able to overcome this pandemic. No doubt, um,
yeah,
we have thought of a way out, but I am missing the actual interaction I will have with the participants because
right, right.
as I was talking to Professor Rakesh sir also, that right from the word go, I get into a discussion and I try to elicit opinions and ideas from the participants because all of you are so learned. Uh, and I would wish that this COVID like situation ends very soon and we are able to get into the real mode of interaction very soon. And I also miss the hospitality at NIT Jalandhar.
And
And
we
thank
miss
you for uh,
them.
that warm hospitality I got last time when I was there. And
No,
whenever we are able to finish up with this pandemic situation, I would be certainly willing to visit any place I'll be called to from any of the participants or for that matter NIT Jalandhar. So thank you so much for the opportunity once again.
thank you so much, sir. Thanks so much for connecting.
My
It's a big
pleasure. Thank you. So good luck with everyone and good luck with the uh, upcoming sessions.
thank you so much, sir. Once again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dear participants, uh, I hope you must have enjoyed and being knowledgeable from this session. Uh, Tomorrow, basically, we have got two sessions, very important sessions. One is from Dr. Vivek Sharma, and another is by Professor Apurva Kumar Sharma. So please be on schedule. Do log in 10 minutes before the scheduled time. Thank you so much. Have a nice day.